oh, well, if he's not even going to try, then why should I? Or I'm doing everything.
Yeah.
You're doing nothing.
Yeah.
But
Well, howdy, folks, and welcome to episode 1 of the GBC podcast. I'm your host, Pastor Jon Brewer. My co-host again today is Jeana Linhart, and we are talking about marriage, right, Jeana? What are we talking about today about marriage?
We're going to be talking about how not to sabotage your marriage. And having said that, there are certain aspects of marriage that are more adult. And so we just want to give you the disclaimer now that if you have young kids listening, you may want to just wait until there's a time where you can preview it first. I do think older kids and teens, this could be valuable information, but definitely take the time to preview first because we will be talking about more of those intimate issues in marriage.
Yeah. And I think there's going to be some value here for singles or people at various stages of life, because I think there's some good ways to set up your marriage, or good practices or boundaries you might carry out with your other relationships that'll be bringing up today. So
definitely.
Yeah. So the heart behind the topic today was, marriage is a pervasive issue. I mean, whether you're a Christian or not, marriage is one of the big issues in our culture today. And I really wanted to come at it today from the angle of what are some of the everyday, ordinary things that we oftentimes sort of slip into that can set our marriages up for challenge and struggle, and over the long haul can lead to even bigger challenges. And so that's what I really wanted to come at today. So here we are. Yeah.
Okay. Well, one thing to consider, you might be sabotaging your marriage if you aim for equality.
Okay. I don't know if you've experienced this, Jeana, but I know in my marriage, and I know this is a challenge for a lot of people, is there's this temptation to try to make things fair. Right, of trying to make sure that my spouse is putting in as much effort as I am, and if they're not, either I'm challenging them about that, or maybe I'm taking my foot off the gas pedal a little bit for the sake of that sense of equity happening. Just starting comments on that topic, Jeana?
Yeah, well, I think in the Christian circles too, in premarital counseling, there's often this discussion about, who's going to do what in the marriage and how will you divide these household responsibilities. And it can become really tempting to think that, oh, well, if he's not even going to try, then why should I? Or I'm doing everything. You're doing nothing. But really, that's not how life works. And there's seasons where I might need more care than my husband does, or he might need more care. But if both of us are coming at it from, I'm going to give 100%, and it might not always look equal, but both of our needs are being met, and that's what truly matters in the marriage. Yeah, because the Bible says we're called to serve one another, right? And so I think that's a little bit of a trap that we fall into of trying to evaluate. Am I giving the right amount? Are they giving the right amount? And the truth is, we're never going to see it the same way, right? Even if I think I'm giving more than my spouse, they're likely thinking the exact opposite, that they're giving in some more profound ways maybe than I am. And the truth is that neither of us is right. You're right. Yeah, and it also is important when you are the person that's in the season of needing more care to be allowed to express that and to say, work is really busy for me right now. I'm so thankful that I have you to pick up the slack in this season, knowing that it's likely going to change really soon and it will be the opposite. Yeah, it's true. And like you said, I think it's good to name that, and just whether you're naming it for yourself or naming it for your spouse, and just I think highlighting that gives them permission to
to receive help, right? Or gives you just the opportunity to feel known that I'm in a needy place right now, and that's okay. Obviously, it's kind of a different story if we're not just talking about a season, but it's just kind of ongoing.
Right.
And there probably needs to be some discernment about, is the way we're doing life working for the two of us or for our family? And so we might have to invite some other counsel
For sure.
into that conversation, right? So we have to say at the same time, right? Because the danger of this mentality is, well, what if my spouse doesn't look at it the same way that I do, and they start taking advantage of me because I'm just giving, and what if my spouse is just like eating it up and they're not having this reciprocal kind of attitude?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's where that communication piece is really important, where you do need to be able to say, I also have needs.
Yeah.
And it seems like things are unbalanced.
Yeah.
Because while we're not looking for things to be equal, we are looking for things to be fair in the biblical sense, where everybody's getting what they need. And that there may be times where I actually can't provide what my spouse needs.
Yeah. Right.
But knowing that he has a need mobilizes me into, okay, then how do we get the help that we need,
Right.
even if it's not being provided by me?
Right. Yeah. There is a problem going on, right? If your spouse doesn't recognize that your needs are as legitimate as theirs, right? So, so there does need to be some reciprocation on that level of acknowledging that needs are real.
Yeah.
And I think this is maybe even a particular challenge for guys in that we don't like to be needy. And I'm sure it's not true just for guys, but I know this is some of my lived experiences with some of the guys in my life is I don't like to call things a need. Maybe they're a want or a desire, but there's something that feels prideful about, I don't want to name it as a need, because then I put myself in a position where I need something from someone, or and that feels vulnerable. That feels unsafe at times. And so I just want to name for those out there that maybe kind of have that sentiment going on in their heart or mind is there's a category of need that is like, I can't live without this thing. And there's another category of need, which is in order for our relationship to thrive, these kinds of things need to be in place. So there's a difference between just, I can survive because I have these needs, but if we're talking about thriving, which is really what we're aiming for, then there's a whole other tier of needs that we need to name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just keep thinking about, just the whole creation story. God creates Adam and says it's not good for him to be alone.
Right.
And so there is that need for the complement, for the Isha to the Ish. And God even describes himself in that same terminology as the helper. And so the helper is not like the under assistant, but the fierce
partner.
warrior, the cool partner that comes in and helps meet the needs. And so it's totally okay, and it's not manly to say, I have needs. I am needy.
Yeah.
We are needy by nature.
By nature.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, let's move on.
Okay. Second point, you might be sabotaging your marriage if you are hiding.
Hiding. Okay. When you hear that idea of hiding, how does that relate to marriage in your mind?
I also go back to the garden in this. Just Adam and Eve ate the fruit and they hid. And I think hiding is a huge alarm for us that this is sin. If I'm tempted to hide a candy bar, even from my husband, it's sin, because I don't want him to know something, even if it's super minor. And that kind of hiding, I think, quickly compounds. Suddenly I'm hiding text messages, or I'm hiding money spending. And So yeah, any kind of hiding, including hiding my thoughts and feelings, hiding my truest needs from him or desires.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned it as sin, and I think that for some, that's probably a provocative way of describing it, right? But Scripture does say that sin is knowing the good you ought to do and not doing it, right? And so when we're talking about a thriving marriage, hiding in any sense of the word is going to be counterproductive to that effort, right? So, and it might be sin. There might be some behaviors that you've got going on, or sinful ways of thinking about your spouse or your kids or whatever it might be. Sometimes it's not blatant sin, though, right? It's not moral in that sense of sin, but sometimes it's just we have certain ways that we behave or speak, and but because we know our spouse will be critical, that we hide those things from them, even though it's not wrong. We want to avoid that situation where that critical
that's a
feedback's
good
coming.
point. And also, just to be super clear, we're not talking about like hiding a surprise or something that is going to come into the light soon and like intentionally soon. This is about wanting to keep something in the dark and hoping that it will never be revealed. Right,
absolutely. Yeah, so you already named some of these things. Our spouse should never be surprised about how we're spending money. We're going to talk more about money a little bit later, but that's definitely in this category too. But yeah, I think we really need to work at being vulnerable, and it's something that when there's conflict in the relationship, we can get defensive. We can start to pull back. Some of us are those fight people in conflict, and some of us are flight or freeze, and either one of those can be forms of hiding. And there's a time where it's acceptable to kind of collect yourself. And maybe get some time with the Lord to prayerfully reflect on, gathering your thoughts, helping, asking the Lord to help you see things biblically. But then we do have a responsibility to go to our spouse and bring those things into the light and, put ourselves out there in a vulnerable way for the sake of thriving. Yeah.
I do think we have to say that hiding for the sake of safety is a different situation.
Right.
So if there are patterns of abuse in your marriage, hiding is a completely different thing. And we'll put some links to some resources in the description of this episode.
Yeah, abuse is never okay, obviously, but even though we're really trying to talk about everyday challenges of the average couple, like we always have to take the opportunity to mention these things. It's never okay, and you should seek safety.
Yeah.
And so, it's a very nuanced conversation when you talk about abuse, and every situation is you take on a case-by-case basis. It does require discernment, and so the invitation is to seek resources, to seek counsel if you find yourself in a situation where you're worried about your safety in your marriage. Absolutely. So let's keep moving.
Okay, number 3, you might be sabotaging your marriage if you were making unilateral decisions.
Yeah, unilateral meaning, of course, I'm not consulting my spouse. My spouse is in the dark about some of the decisions that I might be making. Now, if you've been married for more than a second, you know that we all make decisions every day, right? So it's not that my spouse is aware of, every email that I send or, every stop at the store. It's not necessarily that every single decision that I make, they're included, but I think you want to operate with the spirit of there's nothing that's hidden, right? And that, if there's anything that my spouse would want more information about, that I should be ready and willing to divulge that. There shouldn't be anything that I'm trying to hide. And that those decisions that that impact them or that they would have some level of care about, that they're included.
Right.
If not case by like every single situation, then you've had at least some preliminary conversations in your relationship about how do we make decisions about
Right.
this or that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and there may be things in your marriage where one person, is just maybe one of the spouses is really passionate about finances, and so the other spouse says, I don't really care. I trust you to make these decisions.
Right.
So maybe they're making more financial decisions without that constant consultation, but there should still be a, hey, just so you know, this is what I'd like to do.
Yeah.
Or this is what I've done, but just to make sure that there's still a checking in. There's not just this complete, this is my realm and you have no part of it. That's harmful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So again, it's not that any decisions aren't made individually, but they shouldn't be a surprise. Yeah, I would put it this way: rather than making unilateral decisions, instead you want to default towards making decisions together.
Yeah.
And so again, you're not making every decision together, but default in that direction. Like if I'm going to err versus including on a silly decision versus not including, I'm going to err on the side of making sure that they're involved in that. And again, with those big decisions, we're deciding ahead of time, kind of categorically and at a values level or priority level, how we're going to do these kinds of things, even if they're not necessarily side by side with us making the call on this or that thing. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a temptation sometimes, maybe in some marriages where, when we're trying to lead our spouse, sometimes we can, in a sense, abuse or misuse our leadership to make decisions on behalf of our spouse, and sometimes with good intentions, and yet, in my experience, and I think biblically speaking, leadership doesn't look like lording it over, right? But that we would serve one another, and if we're going to serve our spouse, and as the Bible says, submit to one another, then there should be a sense of partnership and inclusion and decision making together whenever possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, can we move on?
Yep. Okay, so you might be sabotaging your marriage if you leave conflict unresolved.
Hopefully this is an obvious one. If you leave conflict unresolved, you might find yourself in a situation where you're stonewalling, right? Which is just the term for I'm not going to communicate with you, right? I'm going to kind of just shut you out. Maybe I'm not leaving the room, but I'm just not being open and vulnerable and sharing about what's going on in my life. Maybe I'm still cordial, but I'm not actually trying to make our relationship thrive. And so we're saying that's not a situation for your marriage to thrive, right?
Yeah. I think there's also, I think for women, there is a temptation to just go along with it. Okay, I'm not going to make waves. I'm going to pretend like it's okay. And so we act as if it's fine, but in our hearts, contempt is building up, and that is really dangerous for your relationship.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't even realize it's building, right? And so, it's not that your marriage is in real trouble if you all of a sudden realize that there's been a lack of vulnerability lately, but just reading the warning signs, right? That, okay, I do realize there's this kind of bitterness that's building, and I need to bring it up. I shouldn't just let it go, right?
Yeah.
So obviously, instead, what should we do instead is we want to choose forgiveness and reconciliation. We want to choose vulnerability. What I always try to counsel people about is, even if the other person is at fault, or even if you have a sense that, well, they're the leader, they should be initiating, please don't wait.
Yeah.
Don't wait for the other person to initiate. I think biblically speaking, there's good reason to believe that we should both attempt to initiate and not just wait for the other person.
Yeah. And that's not to say you shouldn't take time to process. Sometimes you do need to really just self-examine and root out what is the main issue here. And so that might look like waiting until morning, because you're not maybe not going to be the most articulate at 11 p.m. But resolving soon. I think one thing that my husband and I have really committed to learning to do is learning to fight well, and not fight. We don't define fighting as fighting against each other, but fighting together against the problem. We are a team, and we're gonna conquer the problem.
My spouse is not the enemy.
Exactly.
I've heard that somewhere before. Yeah. And I think that as you were sharing about maybe I need to sleep on this and come back to this in the morning. Some people are immediately thinking of that passage, right? Don't let the sun go down on your anger. What would you say to them about that?
I would say maybe think of the sun going down as in a term of a week. Don't let it be a fortnight. I know that when I'm tired, I'm much more likely to be, defensive or
less productive
emotional
with your conflict resolution.
And so if I can come at this well nourished and well rested and able to really say, this is what bothered me, and also just knowing that conflict is unavoidable, but it's a gift. There's those times in any relationship where there's a wounding or there's a tearing, but it's the mending that makes the relationship stronger. And so the more that I've seen how my marriage is strong because of the mending, the more eager I am to mend right away. Like, I don't want to be torn. Let's get this taken care of sooner than later. Yeah.
And I would just add to that, I think in terms of that verse of not letting the sun go down on your anger, I think there's a way to have unresolved conflict without holding on to anger at the same time, right? So there's a way to forgive, even though maybe we're not ready to talk this out yet. There's a way to go to the Lord and ask for help to forgive and to maybe get some perspective on the conflict that's taking place there, and bring it before the Lord in a way that we're able to put it to rest in terms of those negative feelings. And that's going to obviously help when I do return to the conversation tomorrow anyway.
Yeah, and I think knowing that we are going to talk about this, it might not be right now, just even knowing there's a time on the calendar that we will resolve this is really helpful in just kind of, bringing the temperature down and letting there be rest and letting there be peace while you're still navigating the conflict.
Yeah, and I like that you said put a time on the calendar. Yeah. Like even if it's not literally on a calendar, but to be able to name together, this is when we're going to come back to this, so it's not just floating out there and maybe someday we'll get back to it, right? That's definitely helpful.
Yeah.
So obviously, forgiveness and reconciliation are very, very biblical, core biblical concepts. And we talked recently in church about the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation, that they're not the same thing, that we can't always reconcile, but we can always forgive. And so, in a marriage situation, we should be practicing forgiveness on a regular basis because we're sinning against each other on a regular basis, right? So even though a particular conflict might be avoidable, conflict in general is unavoidable, as you said. And so we have to expect that this is a skill that we need to get good at. We need to continue to grow in. And so I would just challenge our listeners and viewers today, like, unforgiveness implies a desire to get even with the other person, right? That think about that for a minute. If there's some unwillingness to not hold this person's sin against them or the harm that they've done to me against them, if there's an unwillingness to release that, then what that means is you're desiring to have ongoing conflict with this person. And obviously that's a hurtful situation to be in.
Yeah, that's not going to lead to peace at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one thing it took me way too long to learn is that I might have to forgive the same incident over and over.
Yeah.
And I don't mean like he did this and then he did this again and then he did it again. No, the one time he did it, it might keep coming up in my heart as something that I need to forgive again.
Yep.
And to continuously just.
Yeah. The bigger the wound, the harder the forgiveness process is, and the more drawn out it might be.
Yeah. And that's all on me because forgiveness is for us. The reconciliation is for the relationship.
Yep. Right. Yep. Good. Okay. We ready to move to the next one?
Mm-hmm. You might be sabotaging your marriage if you don't set boundaries with the opposite sex.
So true. If you don't have clear distinctions about what is okay with people of the opposite sex, then you're setting yourself up really for suspicion and an erosion of trust is how we would describe that. So if the way that you interact with people of the opposite sex is kind of an afterthought, like you're not thinking about what would be appropriate or what would be good boundaries, then your spouse doesn't really know what to expect from you, especially the way you behave when they're not around. And so they're left just wondering, how is he interacting with these other women that he's interacting with throughout the day? And so it's good to have these conversations in advance or have clarifying conversations along the way. And it's not always going to look the same for every couple. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I remember one time a friend, I don't remember what the situation was, but I suggested, well, why don't you text my husband? And her response was, oh, are you okay with that? And I was fine with it. It clicked that, oh, maybe that's not how it is in their marriage.
Right.
But I think that is something that, again, you communicate about what is going to be okay. And I'm used to women texting my husband because he's a leader in a lot of different areas.
Sure.
And so there has to be communication, and I don't want to be the middle person for that. So, but yeah, it's your boundaries will be your boundaries, but there need to be boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah. And this goes back to the hiding piece again. Like, if you have any challenge about your spouse checking your phone or your email account at any time, you're already in trouble. So make sure that, it's okay to have a certain level of boundary with our communication platforms. It's not like your spouse should have to look over your shoulder all the time. But you should be thinking about what if they were looking over my shoulder all the time, and making sure that you're behaving in a way that they would find not only appropriate but wouldn't leave any room for doubt about your feelings or your conduct towards another person. So, I'll just throw out a couple of examples. Some people have boundaries around maybe texting with the opposite spouse, and so what they'll do is they'll also have their spouse on that thread. So not that the spouse needs to chime in, but it's just one way of having some extra security in the way that we communicate with the opposite spouse. Or another example might be, one of my boundaries is when I go to somebody's home and I find out upon coming to the door that the wife's home and the husband is not, I'm not going in that house unless maybe there's a bunch of kids present or something like that. So there's some discernment that still has to happen there. Maybe the spouse is going to be here in the next couple minutes and the kids are playing downstairs and we got to go round them up. And so there's some discerning going there, but I'm erring on the side of caution. And if there's anything that feels a little off or fuzzy, I'm going to get out of Dodge. I'm going to inform my spouse about the kind of weird situation that I found myself in. And so, sometimes you're just kind of learning along the way, but you're including your spouse in the conversation constantly.
Yeah. This is can be kind of a personal hot button for me because
So we're back.
costume change.
Novice podcasters here. Our battery died last round, so we're back and going to pick up the conversation where we left off. So, Jeana, I think you were about to hit on something important.
Yeah, we had been talking about setting boundaries with the opposite sex, and I just wanted to bring up that is sometimes a hot button for me because I feel like we can unintentionally send the message that we should be afraid of the opposite sex. And or we might hear when someone's talking about these boundaries that, oh no, I better avoid all men because if I'm ever, alone in my office or, at work or at the playground and a man comes up,
Watch out.
Yeah, he's just going to want to kiss me. And that's,
or every woman is a seductress.
Right,
yeah,
and,
right.
And it's just not the case. And it also can feel like, oh no, everyone is expecting that I'm going to just, be this irresistible temptation to someone or all my intentions are to flirt or destroy marriages. And that's also not the case. And so I just would encourage us as Christians to remember that we are siblings in Christ.
Yeah.
And rather than be motivated out of fear, to be motivated out of love. So my love for my marriage, my love for our Father, my love for you as my sibling in any relationship, whether it's same sex or opposite sex, is going to be, I'm never going to intentionally put us in a situation where there might be confusion about intentions or invite other people to speculate or gossip. And then if something happens where, I didn't see this coming and this could look compromising, I'm going to bring it up right away and communicate.
Not hiding.
Right. That this is what happened. And again, make it really, really clear.
Yeah.
My intention is to love you like a brother or to love you like a sister or whatever the relationship is. So no fear.
Yeah.
Love.
Good point. All right. The next one is a doozy. What do we got?
All right. You might be sabotaging your marriage if you practice self-gratification.
Oh boy. So this is a heavy one. And I know this is probably the majority of the reason for our parental advisory warning, because it is a personal nature, this topic. So, but yeah, what are we talking about when we're talking about self-gratification? We're describing practices that are really aimed at, and I think you could say this about all sin, that we're trying to address a legitimate need in an illegitimate way.
Yep, exactly.
Right. So it's aiming for something good, but it's missing the mark. That's what sin is. And so I think sometimes in the way that we talk about these things, we can be very, trying to be condemnatory or trying to elicit shame from people. And certainly God has given us guilt and feelings of shame at times to awaken us to our need for Him, to our need for change. And so those kinds of feelings are not something that are implicitly bad, but we can manipulate in the way that we talk about these things inappropriately or go beyond naming things as sin and bringing a condemning kind of language to people around it. So I just want to be careful about that this is a real challenge and a real struggle for many people. And I'm sure many of you have seen the stats about how just pervasive these kinds of practices are. And so anyway, that's why we've got to talk about it, right? No topic off limits. So, and so where I want to come at this today is really that, pornography, if pornography is a part of that self-gratification practice, isn't necessarily a part of it, but it often is. If pornography is not involved, there's usually an element of fantasy that's involved with it. And that either way, these are inroads to inappropriate and therefore unmet expectations in our relationship with our spouse, right? So, all of these kinds of pornography platforms or, the fantasy that we can engage in, all of these are meant to provoke arousal, right, for us. And so by nature, we take advantage of these tools to help give us the greatest amount of satisfaction and pleasure, right? The problem with that is that's not normal life.
Right.
That's not what it means to be in a relationship with a real human being who doesn't always behave in the way that you would prefer them to and isn't always in the mood in the times that you would be. And that's actually by God's design. And that we need to have times where somebody can say no to us.
Yep.
And we need to have places where we actually learn to develop intimacy and closeness in ways that are not intuitive for us. And there's an element of growing and learning this other person and what's meaningful to them. And there's this reciprocal relationship rather than how do I get as much pleasure for me, even at the expense of the other. And so we got to be really careful about that. I was on sabbatical this summer, and we kicked off our sabbatical with a marriage conference that was put on by Family Life, which is a ministry of Cru. And of course, they addressed this topic, and they brought up this really interesting topic. And I actually showed a video about butterflies. And I don't think I've told you about this, but the whole concept was around supranatural, or I've also seen it described as supernormal stimulus. And the video they showed about these butterflies was that they did this experiment where they took, I can't remember which specific species of butterfly that they took, but they took the male and female butterflies, and they put them in this environment where they were exposed to cardboard cutouts of the opposite gender. And these cardboard cutouts were meant to obviously look like the opposite gender of the butterfly that was interacting with it. Except the difference was that they intentionally exaggerated some of the qualities, some of the visual qualities of these butterflies. And so the spots were bigger, the colors were brighter, those kinds of things. And so they have the cardboard cutouts, and they have the real thing. And so I believe it was the males. They're watching to see how do they react, of course, and they choose the cardboard.
Wow.
Over the real thing. And it's because of the exaggeration, right? The supernormal, above normal, or supernatural stimuli. And so it's choosing the fake over the real, right?
Yeah.
And so it was a really interesting kind of the psychology behind why we go after these things. And it's because there's something, there's some level of, in a sense, maybe a higher dopamine hit. If I'm using my science correctly. I'm not a scientist by any stretch of the imagination. When you go for the supernormal.
Okay.
And so it all goes back to what's the point of intimacy, right? And if the point is to just maximize pleasure rather than develop intimacy,
right,
then we're going to choose the thing that's the most pleasurable. But if it's really about intimacy, and this is where we have to be really careful about what is the actual need, and we need to really dig deeper about what are we really after here, and how has God actually designed us, and what do we actually need. And so, we oftentimes end up choosing the fake over the real because there's something more alluring about it, when actually it's not as satisfying as the real thing.
That's what I was going to say. It ultimately will be empty because it is unsatisfying, and it completely is antithetical to intimacy, which is supposed to be mutual.
Yeah.
And so if you don't have someone to share intimacy with, it's not intimacy at all.
Right.
It is emptiness. I think also I've read about that dopamine thing too, and just one of the dangers of pornography is that dopamine hit is going to be less and less, and so you'll seek out more and more intense fake experiences.
Yep, right.
Because you'll need more to get that same response.
Yeah, same high.
And it just leads further and further down into some dark.
That spiral of seeking pleasure rather than the real need, which is the intimacy. Yeah. And so obviously there's a fallout from falling into that trap, which is that it actually increases distance between you and your spouse. Because you are, rather than seeking intimacy with that person, you're seeking pleasure. And if I'm getting more immediate gratification over here, then all of a sudden my sense of need for the better, the good, the thing that God wired me for, my longing for it and pull towards it is not as strong, right? It starts to wane. And so, but not only that, but because we intuitively know, I think we intuitively know that we ought to be seeking our spouse and not the fake.
Yeah.
We end up hiding, right? So most of the time, and in particular, I would imagine for Christians, we tend to not let our spouse know about the practice or the frequency of practice of self-gratification. So we're hiding, we're seeking intimacy elsewhere, even though it's not real intimacy, and we're excluding the one who was meant to be present.
Yeah.
Right. And so the spiral continues, and your sense of being known diminishes as well. And so it's reinforcing that behavior because now my spouse, they don't know me, they don't see me, they don't get me. And so I retreat to my place of comfort and pleasure.
Yeah.
And so it's this endless cycle.
It also seems like I don't remember the term for it, but where like one thing increases the other and they just keep
feeding off of each other. Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times we might hear an excuse that, I'm not getting what I need from my spouse, so I'm going to go look for it over here.
Yeah.
But really, it's the looking for it over here that then is also making it so that you're not getting what you need, and they just keep spiraling and spiraling.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it continues to devolve, right? Because there's this decreasing satisfaction in spousal intimacy because the way that I've thought about intimacy and what it's about has changed. And when my spouse won't give me the same thing that these other fake avenues do, then I don't pursue my spouse in the way that I was intended to. And the amount of emotional and relational intimacy is going to continue to wane. You're going to find you're more a sense of distance from one another. It also is going to affect your own biology and psychology in terms of your your performance in intimacy. And so that's going to be more off-putting from wanting to connect also.
Yeah.
So we're in trouble.
Well, and it's also going to affect your relationships with other people outside of your marriage because now you're viewing people as objects or something to be consumed.
Right.
And so it can impact your attitude about all women or about all men, and it's harmful all the way around.
Yeah, and I think what a lot of young men that I've counseled in my ministry don't seem to quite grasp is that this is not something that's just going to go away when you get married, and it's not like and also kind of paired with that is this idea that doing self-gratifying behaviors before marriage. Not only do they think that it's going to go away when I'm in marriage and sex is going to be great, but they don't realize that they're setting themselves up for disappointment and struggle by engaging in these things in their earlier years. So my best advice to those out there that hope one day to get married and to have intimacy in the way that God designed it, my best advice for you is you will never miss what you never start. So if you're not engaging in pornography, if you're not practicing masturbation, these self-gratifying kinds of behaviors, guess what? You're setting yourself up well for that marriage relationship. You're not going to be tempted by it in the same way that people are who have already engaged in these practices. So if you never start, you don't really have to worry about it to the same degree. So that's my best advice.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of folks that are already engaged in these practices. It's the kind of thing where it's so personal. And it can be really challenging to talk about. I mean, here we are talking about it online. It's weird, but it's the kind of thing that's so important to a marriage relationship that it really is worth getting some help. For sure. If you find yourself in this situation where you don't know how to get out of it, or you feel like maybe it's at an addiction kind of level, or you just don't know what are the resources that are out there. I have a lot of friends that use the Covenant Eyes software on their computer to help them protect against pornography use, those kinds of things. But it's so important that I would really counsel you to get resources, and that might even mean counseling, right? Sure. So, and that can be a really intimidating step for some people, but I just don't. There's no substitute for getting some kind of help.
Yeah, right? And it will take help. Their willpower alone isn't going to do it,
right?
And even if it's not a big struggle for you or someone in your house, just knowing that pornography is pervasive. You don't have to go seek it out. It will find you.
It's true.
And so having those safeguards in place ahead of time is wise. And setting boundaries with your spouse too, of how are we going to navigate screen time or our online filters, things like that, so that you're setting up yourself for success and not having to come across things that are trying to pull you into a self-gratifying mindset rather than a mutual intimacy mindset.
Yeah.
And one of the best parts of marriage truly is learning your spouse. And you get that dopamine hit in a healthy way. And I've read so many studies about how we, as we increase in intimacy with our spouse, it actually is kind of like an addiction to them, to that one person. And I think that is also...
It knits us together.
Yeah, that's right? God's design in how we start to truly view ourselves as one. Yeah. Because there is just such a tie there that we've nourished.
Yep.
And,
Yeah, I remember years ago when Valerie and I did a different marriage conference. One of the things that they encouraged us about regularly was making bids for connection. Just engaging in practices that they might help bring connection. They might not in a specific moment, but that's why they call it a bid. It's like you're to use spiritual language, we're taking a step of faith, right? To say, this is what I value. This is what I'm going to invest in. And I'm trusting that as I put myself out there in vulnerability and desire for connection in a variety of ways, that's going to be a better return on investment than withdrawing, hiding, self-gratifying kinds of behaviors.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to our first point about equity too. Just if I'm constantly making those bids, but with no expectation of return, I'm doing this purely because I want to show you that I love you. There's going to be something that comes out of that, where if it's I rubbed your back, you rub mine, that also becomes a place where resentment can grow, or
totally
bitterness, or just disconnection. And that's what we're
pulling
trying
away
to avoid. Yep.
All right, can we move on?
Yes. Okay. You might be sabotaging your marriage if you ignore the budget.
Oh, but I love to ignore the budget. If you've ever done premarital counseling, this is one of the main topics, right? Is somebody's always the spender, someone's always the saver. But we want to say, if you decide to spend outside the budget parameters without thought or care for what your spouse will think, you are by definition being uncaring.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And here's the thing. If you don't have a budget, then you are setting yourself up for conflict. That's my take on it. You have to have some conversations about how you're going to spend money, because whether you have had those or not, you already have expectations for how you're going to spend money, and they're going to be different from your spouse just naturally. And so you have to have conversations about how you're going to spend, as good stewards, we want to be intentional with how we take care of the things that God's given us. So,
and that can look different in each individual marriage. We've tried many things to make sure that we're communicating well about the budget. And so some families might have weekly check-in meetings to make sure that, everything that's expected has come out, and or we have this extra money, how are we going to spend it? Some families might have separate bank accounts where, this bank account takes care of our household, but then this is kind of the fun money that you get to spend without needing to consult people on. There's so many different ways.
There's different ways.
But that is, you have to communicate about it. You have to decide how your marriage is going to function with regards to money and spending and bills and all of that.
Oh, man, I've just heard too many horror stories of a marriage relationship where spouses have utterly separate accounts and they don't even know what's in each other's accounts. And I think you're just setting yourself up for suspicion, conflict, erosion of trust. All of that should be freely available to your spouse. No hiding. And so you have to be forthcoming about that. And so I would put it this way: your budget, by implication, is your agreement with your spouse about how you will spend your money. Now, at the same time, I got to rush to say, oftentimes one of the spouses tends to be the one to make the budget.
Right.
And so one of two things I have to say there. So if you are married, your money belongs to both of you, no matter whose name is on the paycheck, right? But if you don't participate with your spouse on setting the budget, then you are allowing them to determine the budget for you, right? So either participate in that so that you have some say about it, or you're saying, I agree with whatever you come up with, right?
Which might work for some people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And check in periodically. Just because you've started in one system doesn't mean you're locked into it forever. There might come a time where you realize, I would really like to have a little bit more say in the budget, or I would like to be a little more hands off in this, and you take a little bit more. So
if they agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, communication. It's
Yeah. Yeah. Just a word of grace about that. Like we get in our rhythms and routines and, we have our own way of doing things in our home. And so when one person's ready to make a change, the other person is not always as anxious to make that change. Right. And so it's always conversational, and, we have to be mindful that we might be ready to move at a different pace than our spouse.
True.
But as spouses, we ought to be working towards the same goals together. Okay. So instead, we want to encourage any spending outside the budget is grounds for a conversation with your spouse, right? That sometimes we get money coming in. Maybe you got a tax return coming in this year, and you're thinking about all the fun things you could do, or conversely, the things you could be paying off. But those are grounds for conversation, right? Yes, we've planned the budget, what we're going to spend monthly, but sometimes money comes out of crazy places. And rather than assuming that this is just fun money, free money that I get to do whatever I want with,
right.
Those are just as much grounds for conversation as anything else. Yeah. Yeah. And so, I know for many people, including for our home, we've utilized a financial planner. That would be something that I would encourage to you, that, the financial planner is not there to tell you how to spend your money. They're there to help you understand what your values are in terms of where you want to spend it, and help you just meet the goals that you have for yourself. So oftentimes if you've never used a financial planner, oftentimes your first meeting is free. So that if that feels like a hurdle to you, that might be just a little bit of encouragement that maybe you can just at least have that initial meeting to help you kind of see where you want to go from there.
Yeah.
All right. Can we move on? Yes.
So number 8, you might be sabotaging your marriage if you turn your kids against your spouse.
Okay, I don't. There's probably not a lot of people that are intentionally doing this. So what are we describing here?
Yeah, I think we're describing the attitudes that we might have toward our spouse is going to shape and inform the attitudes that our children have about our spouse. So whether it's positive or negative, they are seeing that, and we can even unintentionally take our negative attitude and model that for our kids, so that they start believing things about our spouse, whether that's always their character, or maybe I have a bad attitude and I'm unintentionally venting that to my kids, and they're picking up on it, and now they're looking for that in their dad.
Yeah, there's this confirmation bias that develops when we start describing a person's character in this way. And I mean, there's so many places I want to go in this conversation, but I guess we'll start here. If you're helping your kids to see all the flaws and shortcomings of your spouse, then you're actually contributing to the disintegration of your home. And that might sound really alarmist. I don't mean it to sound that way. I just mean it in the literal sense of that disintegration, right? As we're creating factions in a sense, right? Like, your mom always is negative about this thing or that thing, or pick your topic. Now all of a sudden, our way of relating to each other is picking on mom or picking on dad, and rather than building each other up, rather than, as 1 Corinthians 13 describes, that we're always believing the best, trusting, hoping, persevering, these kinds of things. And so, one of the things that we try to do in our home is, even when we have to confront sin in our home or misbehavior, we try to be careful not to name those as character flaws,
Right.
but as behaviors, right? And so it's not that so-and-so is a jerk. It's just that they in that moment, they acted really rude.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you have some thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
I had brought up before that in our marriage, one of our goals has been to fight well. And that has also included fighting sometimes in front of our children so that they can see the full process of conflict and reconciliation.
Sure.
When I was growing up, sometimes my parents would display their conflict and then they would go talk about it privately and we would never see the resolution. And it always felt like, is everything okay?
Yeah.
So we wanted to make sure our kids saw the resolution. And so in the times where it was clear that, mom and dad are not seeing eye to eye right now, it was always about being on the same team. Like right now, I'm confused about something dad said, and we're going to talk about it later because I know he's going to want to fix the problem with me.
Yeah.
And so it was much more about focusing on the problem or the behavior rather than the person.
Right.
Dad's not the bad guy. Mom's not the bad guy. This is a bad problem, and we have to work through it. Just like you as siblings have your tiffs, so do we, because we're human. But always working towards, I know there's going to be reconciliation. We just have to figure it out.
Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful thing to gift our children with is this, conflict is inevitable. But forgiveness and reconciliation are normative, right? This is just how relationships work. Rather than conflict is something to be avoided at all costs, it should be hidden whenever something that should come up. And then they don't have any tools to deal with it when they have their own challenges.
Yeah.
I think there's some caution there too, though, about like always fighting in front of our kids.
Right. That's what I said. Sometimes. Yeah. Definitely there are conflicts that are private and that need to be taken care of without other eyes seeing them. But in those minor things, we wanted them to see the process. I think also just in the times where, I don't know, like where maybe I have not been feeling well and so I'm a little extra cranky, to be able to hear my husband say to my kids, mom's a little extra cranky today. She's not feeling well. What could we do to help her feel better? Getting them on my team is really good. And so I try to remember that for him too, that, dad's had a really long day. He's clearly not himself. So let's give him some space and let's think about what we could do to make his day better.
Love it.
So we can talk about, we don't have to lie or say that, that's okay with a bad attitude coming from someone, but to say, what can we do to change it? Yeah,
that's great. So, I mean, maybe it's helpful to back up, like, where might these behaviors come from where we're trying to get our kids on our side, so to speak? Why would someone be trying to do that?
I think it's when there is a disconnect in the marriage and we feel alone and not like we're part of a team. And so we start reaching for anyone who will.
We want an ally.
Yeah, we want an ally. And rather than running to God, who is always our ally, or running to our spouse, who is supposed to be our ally for that reconciliation, we just start gathering anyone near us to justify why this felt unfair or why this person is the enemy when they truly are. They're not the enemy.
Right. And so so what you're uncovering there is there's some lies we're believing, right? That my spouse is my enemy. No, they're not your enemy. There's this challenge that you need to work through. Or maybe your spouse has been in sin and it's come to light in some way. And so all of a sudden you feel like you're at odds with this person. And so there's been some erosion of trust there that needs to be rebuilt. And so we have, if we don't make a conscious choice, we make a subconscious choice by default, right? To say, I'm going to protect, I'm going to guard, and I'm going to throw up walls to do that. But at the same time, I'm going to get some people on my team because that feels safer than being over here alone.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we have to be careful about, because I think there's a lot of different lies we could be believing
Sure.
that could contribute to that kind of behavior. But again, going back to this idea of making bids, right? Where we want to make a bid for connection, not for withdrawal and disconnection.
Yeah.
And so, if you want your marriage to thrive, which I assume that you do, then everything we've been talking today really is about how do you identify those places where you might be inadvertently making bids for disconnection and sabotaging rather than actually courageously, in some ways, putting yourself out there so that we can build this thing up that God's brought into our life as a gift.
Yeah. Again, too, if there is a feeling that you need to tell the truth about your spouse because you're wanting to protect your children from maybe something that your spouse is doing that is dangerous, that's a red flag for abuse. And if that is the situation that you're in, then that's just a different conversation.
Yeah, it is.
So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
So instead, we want to encourage some of the things we've already kind of modeled and spoken about, but just to name them plainly, we want to model affirming, encouraging, building up, giving thanks to our spouse. And if you've been married for more than 2 seconds, again, you sometimes you have to look. It's not just always obvious and natural to see the good that your spouse is doing or trying to do and name those things and try to call those things out in the most positive sense. So if you're doing these things, you're going to be contributing to a sense of stability and security for your kids and for yourself and your spouse. And you're going to be contributing to your own sense of connection and satisfaction and desire to invest in your marriage as you don't try to make allies at the expense of your spouse, but actually deepen connection of our family as a whole, right?
Yeah.
Okay, last one.
Last one. You might be sabotaging your marriage if you leave God out of it.
This might seem like it goes without saying, but I think, especially if you're in a home where maybe you didn't grow up in the faith or your spouse came to faith later in life, and maybe they don't have some of those embedded practices, Christian practices and Christian values. I think you're more at risk here, but I think it's even true for people that have been in faith their whole lives. And not always knowing how seeing God as part of your family and the covenant that you've made, we don't always know how to do that because we haven't been married our whole lives, and so we have to step into this new phase, or maybe it's not new anymore, but we don't always know what that is supposed to look like. So and the language that I use kind of around this is we want to keep God at the center of what it means to do married life. And so it's not me and God over here and my spouse and God over there, but how do we have an increasingly integrated faith that involves the whole family unit and even particularly the husband and wife. What's the cost if God's not at the center of your marriage? How would you put it?
Something is going to be at the center of your marriage. So if it's not God, then it's likely going to be self. And that is going to, again, go against the mutuality of marriage. When we make it about one instead of both, or about the both becoming one, there's just going to be a lot of self-centeredness.
Yeah, or maybe it's the kids. A lot of people put kids at the center. And so I think it could be a number of things. But even, I think oftentimes we put kids at the center in one sense because my kids give me more positive regard than my spouse does.
Yeah, maybe.
And so when you think about it, putting kids at the center oftentimes is really just another way to say I'm putting me at the center, because it's about how I feel and, the positive feelings that are coming my way.
Yeah.
But it could be a little bit more selfless than that, in that I just love my kids and I want to see them thrive, and I'm just very invested in them. But to not have God at the center and to have something else take the place of God there implicitly means to actually give overemphasis to whatever that thing is, right? It's to get our priorities out of order. So if I've got my kids at the center, and maybe that is in a very kind of selfless sort of way, it still can get out of whack, right?
Right.
Help us flesh that out a little bit more.
Yeah, I think when God is not at the center, we're just kind of fumbling through life, trying to figure it out on our own, and there's no common uniter in that. I know that when I can trust that my husband is also seeking God's will, even when I might not agree with the plan that he has or his ideas, just even knowing that he's seeking God in that helps me to trust that it's not selfishness, and that he's not just trying to be against me. He is looking out for my best. And I think vice versa, when he knows that I'm also seeking God, he can trust that my plans or my ideas are not to harm him.
Right.
But it truly is for both of us to thrive. And when we ignore God, then it's really, really easy for it to just become about me, or to become about, to really just become about me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think we're in real danger of some codependency developing, which is the idea that I'm not okay unless you're okay.
Yeah.
Right. And so, if our spouse or our kids are in that center seat and they're not happy, then my quality of life has diminished.
Yep.
And while, we do share life, and there should be some sense of, if they're hurting, I'm hurting. If they're rejoicing, I'm rejoicing. That's biblical. If my life is devastated because they're going through something challenging, or they're disappointed with me, that's problematic.
Yeah.
And so the beauty of having God at the center, obviously that's where he ought to be, because he's the King of Kings, but also he doesn't need anything from us.
Right.
And so to have somebody who's utterly self-sufficient at the center and doesn't need me to perform in a certain way in order for them to thrive or whatever, that's really freeing for me to live a life that's not oriented around my own feelings, making sure I'm okay, because I'm always okay.
Right.
When, in terms of our relationship with God, if we're right with God, we're okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think our self-identity as being children of God, loved by God, gives us a lot of freedom in being able to love our spouse and love our children, because that love isn't dependent on the other person's love. God's love towards us is
free flowing,
yeah,
and
there's
endless.
Nothing that I could do to earn it, and it's so complete and thorough that I really can't expect that God is going to cast me out or flick me aside. And so having that self-identity in my marriage only impacts my marriage for good. And when my spouse has that too, then we're free to love each other like God loves us, with freedom, with tons of generosity, without concern that, I'm going to be flicked away.
Right.
No, because this is a thorough, all-encompassing, generous, free-flowing love that doesn't have an end.
Yeah, and kind of the buzzword in culture that I think reflects this well is resilience, right? That we develop resilience when it comes to our spouses not being able to give everything that we would like for them to
Yep.
give. And so we have greater patience. We are able to offer forgiveness more freely. We're able to work through challenges because I don't have this added baggage of needing everything to be okay. And I'm placating and I'm hiding and I'm trying to just make you okay so that I can be okay.
Right.
And so there's opportunity to engage with the other flawed person in a way that's gracious and life-giving, rather than me trying to make sure that they've got what they need and that, at the same time that I can feel okay because of that.
Right.
So to center around God enables us to interact with others with healthy sense of both boundaries and self-sacrifice. Because my identity and worth is found in my Creator and Father, not in this other person. So God did establish marriage as that second most important relationship if you're married. And therefore, it's actually in alignment with our worship of God when we keep Him first and we keep marriage second. Everything else kind of begins to fall into place. Because that's how He designed it to work. And so when we keep God first, because He also designed marriage and He's a part of that marriage covenant, then things fit together the way they were intended to.
Yep.
So, and in fact, I would add that loving our spouse becomes a way in which we also worship God.
Absolutely.
So, so it's a beautiful design. Thank you, God.
Yep.
Thank you for that. We made it through 9 different points about how not to sabotage your marriage. I'm sure there's other things we could hit on, and maybe there's some other topics that have come to mind for you that maybe we didn't hit on today that you'd be curious to know. What's a biblical perspective on this or that topic as it relates to marriage and how to thrive? Or maybe there's some other topics in your life that are coming to mind for you that you're wondering about a biblical perspective on. And so that's what we're here for. That's what we're aiming to do. But we're glad that you joined us. Thank you for coming on the journey with us. We invite you to get in the comments and add your thoughts. If you've got some of those questions about other topics you'd like us to hit on, that's a great avenue to share those things. And we'll look forward to being with you again next month.
Yeah. See you next time.
Bye.